Welcome to the Bible Processor Review. Today we're going to learn a little bit about how the Bible Processor works, a little bit more about the Python language, and what the use case is. This code has been on and off for me developed over the past few months. It's been a big blessing in my life, and hopefully it'll be in yours as well. So what I wanted is a text file and of any Bible, just about any Bible mainstream version that's out there. And this is not as easy to come by on the internet as one would think. So I just created a tool to go and get me that. Now, why do I need a text file? Well, I like to use a language learning application called LangQ, and it really just puts a lot of very useful tools together. So they supply different things you can learn about culture, language learning, all these kinds of things, articles with voiceovers. And for me, the main thing that I use out of here is I can import raw text files as an ebook or a file. And it will load up and it'll look like this.
Pasados.
So for me to use it, I can go ahead and go start from verse 32. Ciertamente pregunta ahora acerca de los tiempos pasados que fueron antes de ti. And when I see pasados, it'll read it to me.
Que fueron antes ti. Pasados.
And maybe I don't remember what the meaning of the word is. So when I write here, save meanings, it's something that I clicked on, and everything else that everyone's ever put in here, and some of it's not useful at all, is right here. I just click it, saves the meaning. I determine how familiar I am with the word, how well I know it, and I move on and I get a little score point system, which is nice for learning. And if I wanted to look it on like the SpanishDictionary.com, and I really don't want to open another browser or another tab or window and go search it, I click a button and it drops me on the page. So a lot of little tools that are very useful in one place. And I've been using it for a couple of years, and I have to say it's definitely worth its money. So Bible.com, they have a mission of supplying every Bible that you could possibly ask for in one website. Right now we're looking at KJV Genesis 1. And we just kind of go through here. So all this text data is here. However, there are lots of links and tools they add into it, which are nice if you're studying on here. And it is nice to be able to study on here. But if I was, say, reading a Bible in Spanish, it doesn't exactly give me an English translation like LangQ does, which is why I drop it in LangQ. So I would still have to go and like search a word up, which takes time, and it's kind of nice to have it read to me as well and all that for each word. So if you'll notice up here at the URL, I can just put a number in here and a Bible appears. In this case, the Amplified. If we go back to 1, we go back to the KJV. And if I go here, we see Genesis. Well, what if I put a 10 in here? Well, I go to 10. Well, what if I want Leviticus? If you'll notice, this URL is just an API. I can drive it just like I would drive an API, just like you would for an Atlassian tool like Jira, Confluence, all these different tools. If you're familiar with Jira query language or an SQL format system in your URL to search, that's all this does. It allows me to use my URL as an argument to an API. Well, if we're going to do language learning, what if we What if we end up with a Bible version like El Kitabu Hayat? Oh, this is using a Canaanite script now. This is going to get a little bit more tricky. So I want my tool not only to be able to use this URL API to go through and get all my data, but I want it to be able to handle various scriptings. So let's see how it's built using developer tools. Well, we can just start digging through the HTML structure, right? Just understand how the developers put it together. Until we get all the way down to the verse structures and to our verse. And if we kind of look at different verses in here, we'll also notice that they all have this chapter content unique identifier RRQUA class, right? We keep seeing that. We see these for Bible versions. Or for verse numbers. And then we also have these links in here. We have all this stuff going on, right? But at the end of the day, we know what classes drive verses. And we can search using that. So that's good to know. So we have a way, if we wanted to look at this HTML page as one giant string, we know what class we're calling, so what is on our left, and we know what the ending of that class is for our data, right? So I know what's on the left of my verse, I know what's on the right of my verse, and I can get the thing and sandwiched in the middle. And that's how this code base is going to search. We're essentially just going to be taking all the stuff we don't want on our left, taking all the stuff we don't want on the right, getting the sandwich in the middle. Simple string searches. So that's a little bit about the problem that this code base needs to solve. Now the architecture. You have the Bible.com writer. This has the class Bible.com writer in it. This is where the code is. And we have the Bible.com writer config. And we'll learn about the config file. So up lines 5 to 9, we have the URL base and the base search support. So this right here, this is what we're going to be searching using. This is effectively the API interface. We have our Bible number that gives us a Bible version as a number. You will have to search these on Bible.com to figure out what corresponds to what. You will then have the book of the Bible, the chapter of the Bible, and then this Bible version. It doesn't appear that the version, though, really does anything, and I believe you can run it just fine if you leave that blank. But that's what's there. And then the information you need to be able to replace these and put in the right data. And as we've looked at with the HTML page, we have this parser data. So this little dictionary tells me when my chapter's title starts, when my chapter title ends, and the thing in the middle must be what I want. We have a verse number start. Each verse has a verse or a section of verse inside of it start, end, and then at the end of the final verse of that chapter, we know what we have so we can remove the rest of that HTML page. Now, we also have this books table. This gives you all the different books in the Bible. Bible.com does not change the abbreviations for different languages. And if you are only interested in getting, say, Colossians, Corinthians 1 and 2, you could just leave this books tables Corinthians 1 and 2 in the config file. Now, language-specific data, this is just more for user support. So the cap starting from the bottom, the chapter headers, the chapter header is going to give you a chapter in your output file. These 3 version book chapter are all for command line outputs. This just gives you an idea of where the program is. And then language icons. This is just a user input smudginess factor. My user may input things I don't intend. Maybe they capitalize Spanish, they don't. They use Espanol. And this takes some of that fuzziness and allows the user to input different things for a language and get away with it. And this dictionary is effectively JSON. So if you want to add something on the end of it, you just drop a new line at the end, drop a new language in, and you now have the ability to have one more language in terms of the specific data. It should theoretically process anything, but it would look a little weird having English chapters at the top and then everything else being another language. So that's our config. So what are we using? This little is digits method. This will tell us if an ASCII value is a digit or not. So is this data digit? Request is commonly used as a Python module for mining HTML pages. So this is what will pull the page from our database, Bible.com. Beautiful Soap is a processing tool. It works really well with requests. It does some processing for us. Then we have OS time in our config file. So looking from the top of our class, Bible.com writer, the first thing we do is we initialize this class, and we go and we take all our data from the config file and we drop it on into our object and load that in memory. We also have a deconstructor. In this case, it is still a plain deconstructor. No real changes to the initial deconstructor code there. And we have a 2 util functions, write and make directory. So write takes in data as a string and a file name. It will write all that data to a file and encode it using UTF-8. What does UTF-8 encoding allow us to do? It allows us to use Canaanite scripts, so your ñ in Espanol. It allows for all these different values and scriptings to be inside. So that takes care of our universal, we want most languages to automatically be supported without thinking too hard about it. Now you will notice in this write function or method and a lot of other methods that I use throughout here, I am forcing a data type. And in my experience in development, this is a big blessing for those that come after you. Because somewhere along the line, someone will see a method, they will think they understand what it does without knowing the code base. They will go use it. And it turns out that it fails at line 435 of a file that they never heard of before. And lo and behold, the method that they used was really only supposed to use this data type, but nobody ever made it explicit in Python. And you waste about an hour finding out that you just shouldn't have used the data type you used. So in my opinion, even though Python doesn't require it, I recommend you generally make explicit the data type each method is going to handle. So you'll see a lot of that throughout here. And this none, it just tells you what the function should output, makes it easy for the end user. Make directory, so if this path does not already exist, make a new directory for it. Now scrolling to the bottom of our file, let's look at some example code. So after we use our class, generate our object, we have one method that the user can call, and that is write Bible. So we have a site Bible number. This is what Bible.com uses on the back end to house each of their Bibles. Then we have the Bible acronym, the Bible shorthand, the Bible name shorthand, followed by the language we're using. So let's look at Write Bible now. We have our inputs, and what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to take language, and we're going to put the language that we input in. Now, this is kind of neat. You'll notice down here there is a language variable and a language method, and Python allows that kind of overloading. So what this language method does is it goes to your config file from the data that you loaded, and it iterates through each of these languages, their keys and values. And if the language the user inputs is in that language icons, that fuzzy, it may or may not be capitalized, may be called this for this language, array, list, then it will say that this key, in fact, is the language that we will use. And if we don't know what to put, then just use English, because the code will run either way, but it does make it nicer. So that's the first thing we do. Next thing we do is we do a check on our books table. Books table is equal to 0. Books table from our config. Well, we're not going to be able to really output anything because there's no books for us to write. So return nothing. Then we declare what Bible we're using in memory for each object, and we make a directory for it. Now, there's a few layers to this, so we're going to layer it as what Bible we're using. We're not iterating through this. The user will call this method each time they want a new Bible. Then the Bible acronym, this is from the books table. And then the individual chapters will be loaded up. And one thing you'll notice in here is a lot of these variables, actually I think all of them, they do have an underscore in front of them, as well as a lot of these methods. So in Python, to make a variable or a method private, just drop the underscore in front. So at the Bible level, just notify the user this is what you're working on. Once you go through your books table, first thing we're going to need is our title to our book. So what is this book called? I'm saving the user time by not putting it in, especially if it's in a foreign script that they don't have a language on their keyboard set up for. So we input the book that we're using, the acronym, and we input the Bible number, which will give us the right Bible version. Then we build our URL. And this build URL takes in the book, chapter number, and site Bible number. And it will go out and it will build from the config file this base URL. And all it's doing is it's going through here and doing a bunch of string replaces. And now we're able to drive our API, our database's API, our Bible.com URL from that. So that's all this method does. So this is at the book level. Oh, this is at the get title. Now for each of the, now we will want to try this up to 10 times. The errors that generally occur here are the network is misbehaving and you want some retries. 10 times is more than sufficient, and I don't think I have lost a single bit of data at 10 times thus far. Really think more like 5 is probably fine, but I get up to 10 times before it stops and calls it quits. Now, if we were to ping a server 1,000 times a second, that looks a lot like a brute force attack, and that will probably trigger a lot of security concerns, as well as it starts to make all kinds of network interfaces get kajobbly in between, because generally speaking, HTML pages are not designed to be loaded 1,000 times a second by the same IP address, especially on a single user machine that was not really designed to handle what a server was designed to handle. There are ways to do it, but request is not the most efficient way to do this. So we have a 100 millisecond sleep timer, and this just alleviates all our do we look like we're trying to spam that server, do a brute force attack availability, or are we just a user that likes to click our buttons fast? In this case, we look more like a user that likes to click fast buttons. And this has alleviated most of the problems with the code base. Now, the slowest part of this code base, the bottleneck, is reaching out to that server and all the waiting and transferring of data in between. If you want to make this code faster, it's going to be grabbing that URL and getting that web page back. That is the slow part. But in this case, I'm assuming it doesn't really matter, because I generally just let this code run for half an hour or so by itself, walk away, I get everything I need when I get back. So just a heads up on the code base. We go out, we use request, use our URL, get the database. If our database's status is 200, we have been successful. If not, run through the skin. And then we get our text from HTML. We do a beautiful SOAP processor in our HTML for our parsing. And then we drop everything into a string. And we know from our right side, using our parser data dictionary, our chapter title start. This is everything on the left. So take it what's on the right when we split it. And then we want our chapter title. So go to the right side and get rid of all that stuff on the right, and we'll keep only what's on the left. Now, we will get the chapter number. So we get the book name, but we also get that number of the chapter next to it. So iterate through and remove, while there's still a digit there, those values on the last two most right values. So the last number you see and the space to the book name. And if you did take 10 times for this to run, just notify the user that you weren't able to get it successfully. And that's how we get our book title. And most of this code base will be, for the chapters, will operate the same way. So that's just the title of the book. So notify the user we're now at the book level, and we're working our way on through. Now we declare what our book is. As an empty string, we declare what chapter number we're on. We start at 0. We have a while loop, and we just run it until we have found every single instance of class. So add 1 to our chapter number. You could start at chapter number 1 and put this at the back. Either way, it's going to work fine. Build our URL out, and then we're going to do 10 tries for this chapter. So you get 10 opportunities to build a chapter out. First thing is we're going to give that 100 millisecond sleep to the system, get our URL. If we were successful, we will take our chapter and we will run some processing on our response. So that will be our chapter. So what does our chapter processing look like? So we drop in our response, which is an object. we do our basic response to text and then beautiful soap and then drop it into a string. Same as we're doing with the book title. Now, could have made this a method. Only saw this twice in the code base. If I did a couple more times, I probably would have taken these 3 or 4 lines and made them into a separate method. Now, first thing that we want to do is we want to get to our verse numbers. So on our right side in our config, we know where the start of our verse numbers is. And we have a process string. This is going to end up being the chapter. This is just all your process data. So let's take a look here and run through each of these verse numbers. We're using enumerate in Python. Enumerate just puts on your left side as an output in your for loop a count, an index, and on your right the actual value. So it's giving you 2 useful pieces of information, making it easier for you to write. The first 2 verse numbers are unusable. It's different parts of that HTML buildup. They're tossed out. Next thing we do is we go to each verse. So each of these verse numbers has a verse start to it, which is what we want to do. So this is versus raw. Now this versus raw, you may have the entire verse as one piece, or it may be broken up into sections with all kinds of links in between. And this is where our parsing section comes through for our verses. And in here, each verse section, we want to delete and remove whatever is at the end of this after we split it. So first thing we want to check for is, does this have a number sign? This is always indicative of a link in Bible.com. Drop it. If this is the first part of our chapter, the first part of this process string, and we haven't declared anything else on it, then process string is equal to the verse section. Some general edge cases is, do we want to add our verse section to our chapter process string immediately, or do we want to add it with a space in between? And we're going to look at the cases we don't want to put a space in between, because that is the lesser of what we're going to be looking for. There are going to be fewer edge cases where we don't put a space and where we put a space, and it's easier to code for. So if our current process string at the end of that, we have a space, or we have a open brackets, a parentheses, open parentheses, we definitely don't want a space. We already have that where it's supposed to be bumped up against that parentheses. Now, for our verse section, the one coming in, we have a space or some sort of ending of a sentence or statement. Well, we're going to assume that already has a space coming after that. We're good to go. Drop it in. Bible.com does do some interesting things with the word Lord, and I believe it takes your, if you hover over it, it'll show you which Hebrew word we're using for Lord in that verse. So, Señor and Lord and different other languages will get tripped up here and will want to create a space where there is none. So when you see the Señor or the Lord parts, just add those together without a space. And if it didn't hit any of these special cases, just add it with a space. And if there was no chapter, add none. Just return none, or just return a blank string. And at the end of this, just make sure before you send it to the end user that you did use your config file to trim off the rest of your data. So that's how we process our chapters. Now, how do we know how many chapters we have to go through? Well, that's where this 10 tries come in. So we look at Bible.com. We try to go to Leviticus 73. I don't always know that this is going to be a stable response, but I do know this page will successfully load and I won't be able to get a verse because the verse doesn't exist. So the easy way to handle that is let it run all the way through, and it will hit its limit, and you know that your book's done. Isn't the wisest way to, isn't the most technically solid way to do it, but it is a relatively robust way that works every time. So once you get your chapter out, and this is where we know if our chapter is usable. If it's greater than 0, i.e. we had a chapter there, then we're going to take our book, we will put our chapter name, our chapter in the right language, and then our chapter number. And then we will add our chapter to our book. And if not, go around this loop, this try loop, effectively this in-range loop, a few times. And if we don't have a chapter, it will just do nothing and trip out after a while. Now, if we do have a response code error, notify the end user. So, we notify the end user when our chapter is written. We write everything. We generate our file name, and then we write our files. And then we're done. We just iterate on through this. Relatively simple piece of code. There's a lot of technical details in how to parse things that take some time to do investigative work. But for me, it has been very robust and served my purpose very well. So let's take a look at this code in action. So inside what you've downloaded, you get your Bible.com writer config and your Bible.com writer. Now the KEH and NBLA directories, those you do not have, those are some Bibles that I've generated using this method. And on our right here, we have that directory. So let's go ahead and run this. We're going to call our Python environment, and we're going to call our Bible writer. And because we use that if name equals main, we're calling this, it will run that example code. Now notice on our right, we just generated our directory for Amplified, and we are currently processing chapter, well, we're going a little faster than I can say it, but you can watch it work. And this is usually when I just kind of walk away and let it run, but it is fun to watch it in action. And I think having that user feedback in any language that you're going to use is kind of nice. While that runs, we'll get an example. I'll make a small edit to the code just to, instead of starting with the Amplified, comment that out. You can see an Arabic output. And our right, we just finished Genesis. So Genesis, Exodus 2. Exodus downloaded. And now we have our same thing running in Arabic next to it. So English is running, Arabic is running. And we want to see what one of these files looks like. And this is our plain text file in the Amplified Bible that was downloaded live. Oh, we're already in Numbers. And it just prints your chapter number, and then your chapter data below it, with all the verse numbers in between. That's all it does. And then for an Arabic chapter, does the same thing. And because of that encoding, when we write the file out, it will handle these other scriptings. So that is the Bible processor And I'm hoping that you're able to take this code, get your use out of it, or take it in an entirely different direction. You have a great rest of your day. Like and subscribe.